Hey.
Hello, everyone. Let's go ahead and get started with today's webinar. Um, I'm Lauren Hallanan, and I'm really excited to have you all here today and see so much interest in the topic of private traffic. Private traffic is a topic that I have been paying attention to for over a year now, maybe even a year and a half. I think in 2019, there was a lot of people talking about it in China. And then really in 2020, now everyone's talking about it. But a lot of the conversation is going on in Chinese. And I've found that a lot of the conversation in English is very minimal, and it doesn't go very deep into the topic. And so I had Doris, my co-host, on my podcast a couple weeks back, and we were talking, and I know that Doris is an expert when it comes to private traffic, and she has a whole big course on it. And so I said, you know what, I think we should really host a webinar for English language audiences to give them some more information about what our understanding of private traffic. I think that when I say experts, I mean, we have a strong understanding of it. Doris especially, like more so than me. But just really wanted to have an opportunity to also just have a discussion. And I think maybe understand what people are looking to know about private traffic, what information is lacking as well. I don't want it to be today. We really hope that today's not just us talking at you, but is more of a discussion and getting to know your thoughts, concerns, what you need to know more about private traffic as well. I can see Doris nodding. We definitely agree on that. I think when we were getting into, planning this webinar today, we were also trying to figure this out. I think we found from, you guys were amazing. You sent through so many questions during the registration process. And it really seems like about half of you have a bit of an understanding of private traffic, while the other half of you are really just, at the very beginning stages. You've heard of the term, but you really want to get to know more. So, we're going to try and balance that today. Anyway, I don't want to ramble on for too long. I'm going to be starting off the presentation talking about, what is private traffic, kind of comparing it to Western media, which hopefully will help you get a better grasp of the kind of the role that it plays in China. And also talk about why private traffic has become so popular. And then I will hand it over to Doris, who well, actually, let me just hand it over to Doris right now, and she can introduce herself and also share what she's going to be talking about today.
Hi, everyone. My name is Doris. Thank you guys for joining us. So just a quick introduction about myself. I write a lot about marketing trends in China, and I'm CEO and founder of DigiPoint, which is a consultancy firm with a network of global marketers. And we majorly focus on China market and retail and marketing and so on. So I'm very glad today to co-host this webinar with Lauren. She's actually like my twin sister. We both worked in US and China, and we are so passionate about marketing trends and retail, trends happening in China. So we wanted to do this webinar series together to break down China marketing trends. So this is actually our first webinar together. We hope it's going to go on and on for like years. So today I am going to be sharing after Lauren on some of the classic examples of private traffic in China, and hoping that will bring some inspirations to you guys. And at the end of the webinar, we'll make sure we leave some time for question and answer so that we can interact with you guys. So yeah, Lauren, shall we just start?
Sure. And before we kick off, we had some polls. We'd like to get to know you, the audience, a little bit better. So maybe we should launch the first quick, we had 2 poll questions that we'd like to ask you to get to know your understanding. So if you could just take a moment to click on one of the one of the options, so we can get a stronger feeling. Oh, I see so many clicks coming through. Okay. So there are a couple of people.
Yeah. So a lot of are clicking on, I have heard of it, but don't have a strong understanding.
Okay, great. And I'm actually pretty surprised to see there's 7 people, quite a few people who have are already using private traffic for their brand and want to learn more. So that's great as well. But yeah, it definitely looks like we have 68% of you who have heard of it but don't have a strong understanding of it, or 69% now. So awesome. Okay, and why don't we go on to the second poll question?
Okay, let me click on the second poll and then. Yeah, I have it on.
So the second question is, would you like to implement private traffic for your brand? So a little bit similar to the first question, but slightly different. You know, are you just here to learn about it, or is it something that you're actually considering implementing for your brand? Maybe you don't know if you're going to implement it for your brand. Okay, so it's actually, so do you want to end the poll and share the results with everyone? If you press end poll, they can see. And then, so
yeah, I just click on share.
So 47% of you said yes, that you would like to implement it. So that's a lot of you. That's really great to hear. And I think today Doris will discuss specifically maybe, you know, what are the industries that are the best fit for this, as well as, you know, what are some key things you want to think about before you launch a private traffic strategy. And then I also see a lot of you are really not sure about it. So hopefully today after our presentation, you'll get a clearer understanding of that. Awesome.
Cool.
Okay. Well, this was very informative. So we will close the poll right now, and I think I will go ahead and get into my presentation. Awesome. Okay. So real quick, don't want to spend too much time on this. I think a lot of you probably already know who I am, you know, since I invited you to join the webinar. But real quick, you know, like Doris mentioned, I have a very strong background working in PR, marketing, entertainment, social media industries in China. I lived in China for over 8 years. And since moving back to the US a couple of years ago, I still have been very heavily involved in the China marketing space. So I'd say, you know, cumulative over 10 years of experience in this industry. So yeah, pulling on a lot of knowledge and experience and just a passion for observing what's going on in China. Also, a very, very quick blurb. So my full-time job is as head of marketing for a social CRM, a WeChat social CRM company called Chatly. And then I also run my own company, which is a digital media company and consultancy called China Marketing Insights. And I put out a ton of content about influencer marketing, live streaming, social commerce, and the rise of Chinese brands. So that's, you know, what I'm hosting the webinar today as the founder of China Marketing Insights. And hopefully if you're interested in more English language content, you know, definitely sign up for our newsletter or check out the podcast, listen to Doris's recent podcast episode. Yeah, would love to see more of you. Anyway, into private traffic. So what is private traffic? I'm going to look at private traffic through the lens of a Western marketer. So if you are a Western marketer, then you should be very familiar with the 4 circles that I have laid out here, which are typically considered, you know, nowadays in 2020, what we see as the 4 main types of media, right? So earned, paid, owned, and shared. And so if we're going off of this assumption, right, one of the most beneficial types of media that's very important for a brand is owned media, right? Because owned media, you have the most control over it. You have direct access and ability to connect with consumers. It's most cost efficient. And because you have the consumer that ability to connect with consumers, you can often build a longer term relationship with them, right? And in the West, when we think about owned media, we typically think of your brand website, your email newsletter, right? If you are a Western marketer, then you've heard over and over and over again how important it is to capture your customer's email address, right? And to build your email list, like build your email list, because that's like a direct connection to the consumer. You can be sending them messages all the time. It's more intimate because it's to their email box, right? That's a really important form of owned media in the West. So this is what we are familiar with, right? So what I like to think of when I'm trying to understand private traffic is I like to think of it as a combination of owned and shared media. So sorry, I'll go back a session. When we talk about shared, we're talking about your brand presence on social media platforms and e-commerce marketplaces. So it's that social presence, it's shared, where, you have your own brand page, your brand account, but it's on a platform that you don't own, right? So that's called shared media, just for clarification. So I like to think of private traffic as owned shared media. It's shared media, but more owned than other types of shared media, and we'll get into that. I'll explain it a little bit more. It's a little bit of a crazy concept. So I also have to explain the context behind this, right? So I just said that owned media is very important. If you're a marketer in the West, you know how important owned media plays in your marketing strategy, right? However, in China, consumers' internet behavior is different, right? So they rarely visit .com websites. They rarely use email outside of work. And they rarely subscribe to email newsletters. So everything I just said about, think about in the West, as soon as somebody purchases something, you put them on your email list. If they're, they go to your website, you get them to subscribe to your email list. You're always trying to get people on your email list. And that's not possible in China. People just don't sign up for email newsletters. So instead, Chinese consumers prefer to use social media platforms. They prefer to use e-commerce marketplaces to get brand information. They prefer to follow the brand's WeChat official accounts, right? So we just said, you have those 4 different types of media, but essentially what I'm saying is that in China, owned media as we know it in the West isn't an option. It just doesn't, it exists, but no, it's not going to be effective. So the reason that private traffic came about is because people in China started thinking, okay, so owned media doesn't really exist to the way it does in the West, right? So how can we create a sense of owned media? How can we create the same effect of owned media, but on these social media platforms and marketplaces, on the shared media where Chinese consumers are spending the most of their time? Right? Because you have to go where the consumer is going, right? There's no point in building a website and starting an email newsletter and just trying to drive people there, right? You need to go where the consumer is. So how do we go where the consumer is and apply these concepts of owned media to where the consumer is on the shared platforms? So we look, as you can see on the left here, right? We look at the shared platforms, and you can actually break down social media or shared platforms into the 3 other buckets that I showed before. So there's earned social, what people are saying about you, people are promoting you, people are just organically talking about your brand, right? There's paid social, which is, for influencer posts, promoted posts on a social media platform. And then there's owned social, which is what I see as private traffic. So it's your branded pages, your brand owned groups, your brand owned apps, right? It's social media, but it's a place that you can control. You can collect data about the consumer. You can contact them directly, right? So private traffic is essentially this bucket, the owned social bucket. So here's an example. Here's some example. If we look at the Chinese social media ecosystem, how we would kind of delineate what is public or shared versus private traffic or kind of this owned social. So public traffic would include all of these social media platforms that I've included up here, e-commerce marketplaces, search engines, being written up in the media, things like that. Whereas private traffic would, again, be if you have an app, or, maybe in China, it would be a mini program, right? Mini programs are more popular than apps, but some brands have apps as well. Your WeChat official account. So this is kind of can get a little bit confusing for people because, WeChat official account is kind of public, kind of private. Your WeChat official account is much more owned than your account, say, on Weibo, on Douyin, on these other social media platforms. I'm not going to go heavily into it today, but if you understand how WeChat works, which could be a whole separate webinar, the WeChat official account is much more private. Users have to follow you. You have the ability to send them targeted messaging, direct notifications, things like that, which makes it a much more of you can collect their data into a CRM. So it makes it a much more owned platform than all of these other social media platforms that I've included here. And then really where we hear a lot about private traffic and what a lot of people, when they hear the term private traffic, the first thing that they go to is going to be a WeChat group, right? That's like the most popular form of private traffic, is taking a personal WeChat account, not a brand official account, but a personal WeChat account, and opening up groups of up to 500 people and driving customers to these groups. And these groups are extremely owned. They're essentially the same as having an email list. Another form of this that I've seen with some domestic brands that are targeting like very young consumers, like high school and college age consumers, is the use of QQ groups. If any of you are familiar with QQ, it's very popular among very young Chinese consumers. So I've seen a couple of brands, particularly a Chinese cosmetics brand called Girl Cult, using QQ groups because their target audience is very active on that platform. And then WeChat Moments, right, would be another form of private traffic. So, when we're comparing owned media and private traffic, another thing that I'd like to point out that you might have picked up on from that previous slide is that private traffic is often centered around communities. So whereas in the West, I keep referring to email because that's the classic example of owned traffic, right? So an email is from the brand to the consumer. Whereas in China, a lot of the most successful case studies of private traffic center around, say, these WeChat groups or QQ groups, where you're not just having that direct communication with the consumer, but you're also putting them into a group with other consumers. And sometimes you're even segmenting them depending on why they're interested in the brand or how they join the group, their location, things like that. And so you're actually creating a community of users that you're directly communicating with, but they're also communicating with each other, which adds a earned media component to the owned media, which makes it even more powerful, right? Because earned media is really the most powerful form of marketing. So the great thing about private traffic is you build a community, it's owned media plus earned media all in this community together. And building brand communities increases retention. So why private traffic? Why all of a sudden? Why has it become so popular in China these days? Money. Cost, right? So like I mentioned, I've been working in China marketing for a very long time. And, for quite a bit of that time, people were just throwing money at advertising because it was pretty low cost. And then, we've started to see a couple years ago as more and more Chinese consumers are getting on the internet. You know, there's I don't know the most recent statistics, but a massive majority of the Chinese population is on the internet now and active on social media channels, active on e-commerce channels. And so naturally, as that happens, things are getting more saturated. It's getting harder to reach consumers, and platforms are taking advantage of that. So I've included a couple graphics from my friends over at Park Lu. They're a China influencer marketing platform, and they put out this wonderful report about retention marketing not long ago. And so I nabbed a couple of graphics from that report. And you can see from 2015 to through 2018, there was a 286% increase in paid media CPM, right? So the cost of advertising on leading e-commerce platforms in China. And that's just an example, right? The same thing happened across a ton of the pretty much all of the social media platforms in China. I remember I used to be personally very active on Weibo, and from 2015 to 2018, I had to stop trying to grow my personal audience on Weibo, because when I first started, it was very easy to organically grow a following. And probably 2016, 2017, the organic reach was just horrible. It was extremely stifled. I had to pay insane amounts just to get my posts seen by even my followers, let alone try and reach new followers. So the user acquisition costs in China have skyrocketed in recent years, is essentially what I'm trying to say. And because of that, you know, brands are trying to think of how can we have a lower cost way of communicating with our followers, with our consumers. We don't want to have to pay to communicate with people who are already our followers, right? There's also a growing number of brands in the market. So how do we compete for consumers' attention? And the best way to do that, right, is through owned media, where you have that direct communication and that direct engagement with the consumer. And then something that I'm not going to go too much into, because I know Doris will touch on in her presentation, is that another benefit of private traffic is that it humanizes the brand. They often use characters, personas, to put a face literally to the brand. And so you feel less like you're talking to a brand, more like you're talking to a human, which again makes it increases that engagement level, that trust level. And again, you know, Doris will talk more to this, so I won't go too far into that. So I've already mentioned some of the benefits, right? You know, costs are getting super high. People are thinking of alternatives. And the benefits of private traffic, many of them are similar to why you want to have a strong owned media plan in the US as well, right? So like I mentioned, you can have generate much higher engagement because you're directly communicating with consumers. Oftentimes you're putting them in groups where they will all start engaging with each other as well. So as I mentioned, these private traffic groups will also then drive earned media, right? So word of mouth, referrals, because people are talking to each other within the group. Maybe you're sharing something in the group and encouraging people to share it out so that they can earn some benefits or get some free product, things like that. As I mentioned, private traffic will increase retention, therefore increasing the lifetime value, the LTV of your customer. And closed loop, this gets into the fact that a lot of, like we mentioned, a lot of private traffic is using WeChat groups, WeChat moments, personal WeChat accounts mixed with WeChat official accounts. So a lot of private traffic is very WeChat focused. And because of that, you can keep your consumers in a closed loop. And by that, you know, they're in the private traffic group. You can share your e-commerce mini program store into the group. They purchase something from the store, and it's all within the WeChat ecosystem. You know, all of the information that they're getting is all within this closed loop. You're not sending them off to other channels and losing them. You're able to keep all of the data and interactions within WeChat. And then this last point, gathering consumer data, this is another excellent benefit of private traffic, is that it's essentially, a lot of these groups can be used as focus groups. You know, we've seen a lot of brands who have, and again, Doris will talk more about Perfect Diary in her presentation, but, you know, Perfect Diary has used their private traffic groups to incubate a whole new brand, Abby's Choice, which they launched not long ago. So you can use these private traffic groups. You know, these are your most loyal consumers. So a lot of brands are leveraging this to get consumers involved in the product manufacturing process, to get feedback from them, to learn about their preferences, and to gather a lot of data that they can then use to make products and marketing messages that really suit their consumer. So that's all for my portion of the presentation. Quick, just throwing up my contact information. If you want to get in touch with me and follow my official account. My podcast is also on Himalaya, if anybody prefers to listen to that. It's of course on iTunes and Spotify and everything as well. But now I'm going to pass things over to Doris, and welcome Doris. Hopefully that was a good introduction to things. And before Doris gets into her presentation, we want to do one more poll to kind of measure some of your thoughts on some things that she's going to talk about in her presentation. So welcome back on, Doris.
Hi. Okay, I'm going to just do a quick poll first before I start my presentation. So my connection might be a little bit unstable, so just bear with me if the connection is not very good.
I'm really interested to see the results of this poll.
Yeah, so this question is about, what is your greatest concern about implementing private traffic?
So it's looking like
it's so interesting.
It keeps changing. I was about to say which one. Okay, so it's looking like the biggest concern right now is that it's too time consuming, not scalable. And then we've got three of the other answers are tied. They're exactly tied right now for second place. So one, not clear on the benefits. Hopefully I somewhat cleared that up just now, but I guess not too much if people are still not clear on the benefits. Number two, not sure if it's relevant for my brand or industry. So Doris will definitely touch on that in a moment. And then don't know how to. So people don't really know how to execute it. Maybe just how to even get started with this topic. So awesome. Okay, well, handing it over to you, Doris.
Cool. All right, let me just pull up my PowerPoints. All right, so hi everyone. Lauren just gave a great overview of what private traffic is and why it is important. I'm always amazed at how, Lauren can get very Chinese at it. It's awesome. And I'm gonna go into some case studies and examples so that we can look into how brands in China are leveraging private traffic to grow their business. So before I do that, let me just do a quick introduction of myself. I was actually a system brand manager at Unilever in New Jersey, and then I was Michael Kors social communications manager based in New York City, but I was looking after Asia Pacific, especially China market. So I really understand from a brand perspective, they want to care about the brand's equity, at the same time also on the sales results. And then later I joined Alibaba Group, and I was based in San Mateo to be head of marketing operations for Alipay US. And then 2017, that's when I actually came back to China and joined a startup called White Closet, which is actually a Chinese equivalent of Rent the Runway, if that's better understanding for you guys, because I want to actually get closer to the China market and have a better understanding of how things work here. And right now I started my own company, like I just mentioned, DigiPunt. So I'm gonna go into 3 cases today, each of which is actually a very good representation of its own type. The first one is Perfect Diary. It's a perfect example of how an e-commerce brand can go into private traffic and build their own empire. And the second case is Kids Want. It's actually a retail store for mom and baby care products, but they leverage private traffic to actually grow their business and also increase their customer loyalty. And the case 3 is actually one of the most popular influencer in China, Austin Lee. Chinese name is Li Jiaqi, and he has a very powerful private traffic empire nobody actually has been aware of. He is using influencer private traffic strategy to increase his sales. Okay, let's go into the first one. So Perfect Diary. I'm sure most of you guys already heard about this brand. If you haven't, let me just do a quick introduction of this brand. It's actually one of the most hot selling or best selling sea beauty brand. It's established in 2016, but what's different on Perfect Diary is it's not like the traditional brands. They're always using traditional marketing strategy, television commercials to promote the brand. They are using very new and upcoming social media, such as Red, Douyin, Bilibili, all these new social media to tap on the Gen Z generation. So they became really popular within a short amount of time. But what's really interesting or innovative about Perfect Diary is that how they use private traffic strategy. So if you have any chance to buy any products or any eyeliners, cosmetic products from Perfect Diary's Tmall shop, you're probably gonna get one of these packaging insert. It's like a card, and there's some QR code on it. But if you pay close attention to this card, you're gonna see they're hinting you to scan this QR code to add someone called Little Wanzi or 小丸子. So also on Perfect Diary's official WeChat account, on one of the tab, you're gonna also see a tab showing 撩小丸子, which means hit on 小丸子. So if either you scan the QR code or click on this tab, you're gonna see this activating QR code. When you scan it, and you're gonna add this girl, and she's gonna be like, hi everyone, my name is 小丸子, I'm your benefit girl. I can show you a lot of tips to become pretty, and I can show you lots of cosmetics tips. I can also add you to one of our WeChat groups so you can meet some other girls who wanna also be interested in beauty products. When you actually join one of these WeChat groups, you're gonna be amazed how many girls are already in it. And within this WeChat group, you're gonna see lots of activities or events going on. So for example, you're gonna see mini program pull over by 小丸子 and asking you if you wanna see a live stream showcased by her on how to do the makeup on a daily basis. So that's just amazing. So what's actually behind this brand is Perfect Diary's humanizing the brand using a fictional character, or we would call it IP, Little Wanzi, 小丸子, to effectively reach the target audience. Like Lauren just mentioned, the brand nowadays, when they tap into private traffic, what they usually do is, instead of just using the brand logo, which looks kind of cold and unhuman, they will usually just make up this character to see it's almost like a brand ambassador And then the friend of the brand to see like, we are actually also a girl, we understand what you need, and you look into her moments. She's actually looking like a very similar girl who wants to do barbecue in the weekend, who wants to go to the beach, you know, to Sanya, etc. You would sometimes forget she's actually the friend, she's actually the girl behind Perfect Diary. You would just think she's, you know, a normal girl, but actually behind it, it's a complete private traffic strategy implemented by Perfect Diary. So 小丸子 will usually invite users into WeChat groups, like I just said. So if you look into these two pictures, you would see 小丸子 and her friend 小梅子 and some other girls are gonna be very active in these WeChat groups and showing some sales and events and flash sales and live streams so that you can actually engage with them. But if you pay more attention into these groups, you're gonna see lots of girls always being very active. They are actually fake IDs also planted by Perfect Diaries in advance. So that's just quite amazing, right? If we look into the whole, you know, system of this Perfect Diaries private traffic, you're gonna see within their retail store, they're usually asking their store associates to drive customers to their WeChat official account or adding the friends of the little Wanzi personal WeChat account to be their friends, or they're gonna drive them to a WeChat group. And from these WeChat group or personal account, the little ones actually are driven by lots of employees. They're actually, you know, lots of employees in Perfect Diary doing it, and they're gonna try very hard to convert you to their Perfect Diary mini program or another mini program called Home of Wanzi. And then in that, you're gonna see, oh, there's new products coming up. Oh, there's this new eyeliner I can actually shop into. So with this personal account, fictional ID, and WeChat, Perfect Diary can have access to all of its followers or users without spending any extra dollar on marketing spend. So that's effective, free, and it's repeat purchase. And very interestingly, this month, actually, Perfect Diary just announced that they're launching the second brand, which is called Wanzi Select. So meaning they're incubating a second brand based on their private traffic amount of users and giving birth to a second brand. So lots of people are actually referring to Perfect Diary as a classic example of how cosmetics brands or CPG brands can do private traffic using this strategy of a fictional ID. And just to give you a sense of how well they did it, these are some some estimated number that I got from 2019 on Perfect Diary. So they have about 5 million private traffic users based in their WeChat, you know, ecosystem. They have 200 employees working on private traffic. That's about some estimates. And half of them are actually interns. And they're actually you know, gaining RMB 300 to 500 million revenue from private traffic only in 2019. So these are some of the number estimates I have gathered on Perfect Diary. So that's case number one. So case number two is a very interesting example of how retail store Kids One utilize private traffic to grow their business. So a lot of you guys might have been doing retail stores either in US or in the Western world. And my guess is your business is probably hit a lot by the coronavirus because the decreased foot traffic to store. So Kids One has been facing a lot of issues prior to launching their private traffic because they suffered a lot from decrease of traffic to stores. And they also suffer from low repeat purchases or low customer loyalty, because once customer enter their store, they're not returning back to the store. So how did they do it via private traffic? they actually use WeChat groups to tackle this problem. So nowadays, if you search kids ones in Chinese, it's called 孩子王 on WeChat official account, you're gonna see it's also pulling you to add one of its assistants. And once you add his or her assistant account, you're gonna see they're gonna invite you to a lot of groups. For example, they're gonna invite you to a limited offer group, a hot mom group, a pregnant mom group, a flash sale group. They have so many groups that they can invite you into. And when I joined these groups, I found out they actually have millions of WeChat groups in these and very carefully managed by their machines or CRM system in the back end. Moreover, they actually branded their store associates in store as mom care specialists. So they're no longer calling their store associates just sales. They are rebranding them as mom care specialists and really spending time to educate them on what are the questions mom's gonna ask, how you should educate moms if they're having a newborn baby, etc. At the same time, they build an entire Black Gold membership program, which is a loyalty program. So if you spend 199 RMB a year, you're gonna get a serious limited offers and birthday gifts, etc., and one-on-one VIP service based on that. So basically what they're doing is they're filtering the customer who actually visit their stores and filtering out the customers who are willing to pay more and bind them to these loyalty programs with the help of their store associate as consultants to help them within the groups. At the same time, they also build up apps, official accounts, WeChat groups, personal accounts, mini programs, all this matrix to help sustain their private traffic theory. So they actually did this strategy for more than 3 years. Right now, their number has grown to have 270 million members and 500K Black Gold members. And they have RMB 10B revenue in 2018. They also have 300 stores, 1,500 app installs, and 50 million mini program users up to June 2019. So it's a very amazing example how retail store can leverage private traffic with the help of groups, apps, mini programs to bring the customer offline to online and online to offline again. So the last example I'm gonna bring you to you guys is one of my favorite influencer, Li Jiaqi, Austin Lee. So if you have heard about e-commerce, live stream e-commerce, you must have heard about Jiaqi Li, which is the the lipstick bro. He sells lipsticks like crazy. But what people don't know about him is actually he has 300,000 private traffic users out of his WeChat following account. And he usually, does teasers of his live stream e-commerce in these groups so that people are aware of what's the product's gonna show up in his live stream. And then he also does a very good job of after sales service in his WeChat group. So how people, when they purchase on live stream e-commerce, they can get lots of problems or questions afterwards. They're gonna usually ask the influencer like, oh my God, why did I buy this product and this product packaging just broke, something like that. So Austin Lee just took advantage of this WeChat group account and then help his users to really figure out their problems after sale. Meanwhile, he also built a very incredible loyalty program with points. So the more fans who purchase in Jiaqi Li, in Austin Lee's e-commerce shop, they're gonna gain more points. And if you have more points, you're gonna redeem more gifts. So that's how he actually maintains his follower fan base into this loyalty program with private traffic. So in these three cases, you can obviously see no matter you are a brand or you are a retail store, or if you're an influencer, you can always leverage the help of private traffic to gain a more effective reach, a better loyalty, and also a higher repeat purchase of your business. So just to echo what Lauren just mentioned in terms what private traffic is really, I think it basically is using a fictional character. Sorry, I have a typo here. It's actually private traffic, not traffic. So I think what private traffic is really doing is that it's using a fictional character to humanize the brand, and then turn the brand image into a human being. And people actually like human being better than brands. People like people. So when you're showing this character or human or girls in front of your customer, they tend to trust her because she's more like a human and she can actually provide lots of service to your target audience. And at the same time, when you are utilizing private traffic with your CRM, with your mini program and WeChat system, you can actually gather lots of data points and from your target audience. And with these data points, like Lauren just said, it's a closed loop. You can know what customers really want. It's really a DTC model, direct to consumer model, where you can directly reach your customer and at the same time collect their needs from these, from these reach. So overall, I think private traffic is basically an upgraded version of social CRM with own traffic and personalized IP to establish effective reach. And it's actually really important. So from the 3 examples I just showed you guys, it's really easy to think that, oh my God, it's really easy. You can just do some WeChat accounts, some WeChat groups and mini programs, and voila, you can get the private traffic strategy going on. It's actually not true. You actually need to spend a lot of time investing the infrastructure of the CRM system, the loyalty program, content center, customer service center to support the private traffic system instead of just having the groups going on, because later on you're going to find out the WeChat groups are not going to be active anymore, and you're actually going to spend more and more people on WeChat group to sustain it. I guess that's why lots of people, why you guys in the polls, you guys are selecting, it's just not scalable, it's very time consuming. So I guess most of you guys already spend time to do the research on private traffic, and you guys are right on that. So in general, just to summarize what I've been talking about, I think if you're running into the following problems, you should probably consider private traffic. If you're running into repeat purchase issues, lack of loyalty, or in-store sales decrease affected by coronavirus, I think you might be able to consider using private traffic as a strategy to make up the the loss of your business sales. But what industry are actually best suited for private traffic is actually the question I often get asked on. I think to summarize it, there are some must-haves and some nice-to-haves. So for must-haves, I think, like Lauren just mentioned, you would definitely need to have high LTV, which means high lifetime value, to support your business if you want to do private traffic. So for example, either you gotta have a frequent purchase. For example, if you're a FMCG, fast moving consumer goods company, or like you're a beauty brand, you're a food brand, people need to purchase your product more than once. They need to actually repeatedly purchase a product, then it's a great business. You should definitely try private traffic. Or if you're not a frequent purchase category, but if you have a large average order volume, for example, your product is house or a car, which is very expensive, it's a large volume. I mean, it's a very large amount of money you need to spend. That's also worthwhile to do private traffic, because you need to actually spend a lot of time on personnel or customer service people, staffing to support this private traffic. So if you don't have a a very big lifetime value to support your business, it's probably not worthwhile. But in general, business needs to have high LTV, right? So that's a must-have for private traffic. And at the same time, I think there are some nice to haves that we need to consider. If you have these nice to have, then great. It's ideal for you to do private traffic. So consider this: is your product or your brand content driven? If your product is very, it has lots of talkability, for example, it's very talkable. It's like beauty products. Like girls can talk about beauty products for hours without stopping because it's just so interesting. I can talk about lipsticks for hours, or mom can talk about mom and baby products for hours. So that's great talkability. For these talkability categories, they usually have lots of content that be able to, create it for your moments, for your mini programs, for your WeChat groups. So that's a great nice to have for private traffic. At the same time, if you don't have talkability, but if you have a great, a huge information gap, for example, if you're doing a gym business or skincare business, there's lots of information gap in it. So for example, there are a lot of things that customers want to know, but they don't know, but you can teach them. It's very ideal. It's great for a private traffic. You can actually just build some fictional IP or character as consultant or specialist. For example, one of my friends, she's doing a skincare product. So she's making her private traffic character as, okay, my iPad is just blurbing right now. So my friend, she's doing a skincare brand. So what she does is that she would just create this fictional character, like a skincare expert, and she would tell people how to do their skincare via WeChat groups. So that's very that's very ideal for private traffic. So we just touched upon what kind of industry are best suited for private traffic, but there are actually a lot of potential problems you're gonna meet or encounter when you actually are doing private traffic. So we might want to consider these potential problems from happening. So the first one is difficulties to educate in-store associates. Like what I just mentioned with Kids One example, they did great with in-store associates, rebranding them as mom care experts, and then helping them to convert people to this Black Gold members. But actually at the first, they ran into lots of issues because as you probably realize, in-store associates are usually more familiar with in-store problems and issue, but online, within WeChat group, in e-commerce, it's a whole different world. So that's something you probably run into, which is you need to do a lot of training, associates, in-store training, associates training to help them understand this WeChat dynamics and ecosystem. So that's the first problem brands usually run into. And the second potential problem is hurting brand image due to low quality content. Again, if you want to run a WeChat group or some WeChat official account, imagine if your associates are posting really low quality content that's really off brand. And so even if they're driving sales from this WeChat ecosystem, the thing is they're hurting the brand image. They're thinking, oh my God, why are you posting this picture? This brand is not the brand that I imagined to be. So that's gonna be hurting your brand image. So that's something that we definitely want to take into consideration. The third problem brands usually run into is high maintenance WeChat groups, which is something that we just talked about, is the issue of too time consuming, because WeChat group can actually be a, how do you say, double sword? It's gonna be good and bad. It's good because it's very effective in reaching multiple people at the same time, but it's really bad because once one person is complaining about your service within this WeChat group, he's gonna turn this WeChat group into disaster. So that's why you need to be very careful before launching WeChat groups, and you need to be really selective when you select people into WeChat group. You shouldn't ask or invite everyone into your WeChat group. It's just going to be dangerous. So these are some of the potential problems that brands usually run into when they do private traffic strategy. So if you're interested in how to tackle these problems, well, feel free to contact me afterwards. So my suggestions for international brands, how they want to do private traffic, is that, first of all, if you're a luxury brand, I would really suggest you to be careful when launching private traffic, because it's most of the time, if you're getting the wrong crew, it's going to hurt your brand image. So you need to be very selective when you pick out who you want to work with. I think the best choice to work with actually is to collaborate with a channel or retailer or distributor who have private traffic instead of doing on your own. So that's going to be a safer choice. So for example, imagine you work with, Macy's, and Macy's have a private traffic, and they can do it instead of you doing it. That's going to be much safer. So that's the tip number one. But if you are a fast-moving consumer goods brands, I think it's less dangerous for you to try out private traffic. But definitely, you need the help of a China marketing team, because you need to be very savvy on how to launch the WeChat groups, who you need to select to invite into the WeChat groups, what type of content you need to post on your WeChat moments. You cannot do it on your own. It's either gonna be ineffective, or it's just you're gonna lose lots of fans. So I think it definitely needs to be very careful when you want to launch your private traffic strategy. Okay, so this is all for my today's presentation. If you want more information, feel free to go on our website, which is digipond.com, and then feel free to contact me at doris.ke@digipond.com. So, okay, that's it for now. So Lauren, should we turn back on our camera and let's do some question and answer session?
Sounds great. Yeah. I've been seeing lots of questions come through the Q&A and the chat. And then there was also a ton of questions that you guys submitted ahead of time. So I'm kind of going to look through. I don't think we're going to be able to get to everything today, but, and I think that Doris, kind of answered some of these during her, her talk just now, but let's take a look. I did see a couple of questions surrounding kind of a different topic, which is whether or not private traffic, some of these concepts could be applied here in the West. I saw a couple of people asking these questions, both ahead of the webinar and then here in the Q&A section now. For example, do you think applying China marketing trends like private traffic customer groups on Western social media platforms like Facebook and Instagram, is that possible or feasible? But somebody else commented, there isn't really a tool like WeChat that's, good for private traffic groups. So, and I also saw a couple of people said, what's the potential in the US, things like that. I think, and Doris, you can chime in. I think that because owned media like email and websites and other platforms like this already exists in the West, I feel like there's less of a need for groups, for chat groups, private traffic groups. But I think that it definitely could have the same potential that it has in China. But the problem, like one of our attendees mentioned, is that I don't feel like it would be, a lot of brands have Facebook groups, but you're really limited to a specific demographic. Like, I don't use Facebook. I rarely go on Facebook. I'm not in any Facebook groups. It's just, and I think that most, I guess millennials is what I would be. I don't think many millennials and Gen Z in the US are, using Facebook or Facebook groups. Instagram is really limited as far as like the size of the group, the features of the groups. And I think, you know, maybe you could consider WhatsApp, but I just think that there's some technical difficulties. You know, it's not like WeChat where, you know, you can integrate it and you can have that closed loop that we talked about with the WeChat mini program stores, your official account, the fact that people are spending all day, every day on WeChat. Like, to me, it's just, there's not as much potential for this private traffic tactic in the West. Doris, did you have any thoughts on that? Like whether or not people could apply private traffic to a Western marketing strategy?
Yeah, I actually think newsletter is already the equivalent of the Western format of private traffic. And I never seen any, you know, Facebook groups that actually host private traffic. So I actually don't know. I don't know if is it China is ahead of global or whether US is gonna go into this group community thing later. I'm actually not sure, but right now I don't think US is gonna go into this strategy actually.
I could see the potential for a lot of like younger consumers. I think like super digitally savvy younger consumers, but I think then you get the issue of group management. I would not want to manage a group of like teenagers. You know, I think that's probably the issue there is like, I feel like, yeah, you might have a little bit of group management. And then I feel like, older, you know, more middle-aged consumers in the US who also, you know, say love Facebook groups and things like that, you're kind of limiting yourself to that demographic. So I just don't feel like there's as much of a need for it, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Let's see some of the other questions that we had. Oh, one good question was, how could a brand grow private traffic if their brand is say still unknown in China or has a very small presence in China? Like they don't have much of a public traffic pool to be pulling from. Like they're trying to build public traffic and private traffic at the same time. Do you have any tips or suggestions for that? Would you recommend that? You know, what are your thoughts on that?
Oh, yeah, actually lots of brands are doing their how do you say, so if you don't have lots of traffic right now from public traffic, you actually can do a lot. You actually can do a lot from your private traffic. You can actually manage this private traffic group by asking them to share a lot. It's basically word of mouth strategy, right? If you treat your first 1,000 customers good and well, and they're gonna be very happily share your products, so that's gonna grow more and more. So I actually think when you're launching your first product, you actually need to build a small group that's gonna be the most loyal, for, you know, the first loyal fan base of your customer, and they're gonna stick to the last.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think that's something that brands should be doing. Like you said, I think that like as soon as you start getting any followers or any customers in China, you should be trying to funnel them into a group so that you can you know, develop that relationship with them. That's actually like you know, Doris mentioned with Austin Lee. You know, I think before brands were using private traffic, influencers in China were really the ones that came up with the idea of private traffic. You know, I like influencers in China, as soon as they start to get an audience on any of the social media platforms, they immediately encourage their fans to join like fan groups, and that they use that, like they leverage that loyal fan group to help them share content, to help them choose the best content, things like that, you know, essentially how brands are using private traffic now. So yeah, so I think it's like, it's a great way, even when you're just starting out, to even help you grow your public traffic. Let's see. Feel free to jump in, Doris, if you see some other questions
I
come
see some
through.
interesting questions, which is actually more generic. Like, what is the difference doing marketing in the US and China? Did you see that question?
I think that's a little bit too big, broad of a question for us to address today. I think if you want an answer to that, you could probably check out like my content and Doris's content.
Yeah.
I think if you read through all of our content, you could get a better answer to that.
I saw a good question. So Ian is asking, do you see a B2B company, for example, consulting company providing branding solution for brands, adding private traffic? How can they add it and how can it be different? I think Lauren and I are actually doing it, right? So I am actually doing a brand consultancy and a network. I'm basically doing it out of a private traffic. So I have about some 20 to 30 paid WeChat groups and some hundreds of free WeChat groups. That's how I reach my potential clients, because it's actually really effective. And I always do webinars in China out of these WeChat groups to interact with my potential customers. So Lauren, are you doing something similar too?
I have a couple of WeChat groups, but for me, I think my newsletter is my kind of form of private traffic, right, since I'm mainly, directed at a Western audience. But yeah, I mean, I think what Doris has done with her business in China is a perfect example of B2B leveraging private traffic. Yeah, so I'd say go study Doris. I think it can be totally applicable. Maybe let's do a couple. Oh, a good question that I saw come through during registrations was, in China, is private traffic best for a specific demographic, or is it something that pretty much all demographics, because so many Chinese consumers use WeChat, so is it all demographics that might be relevant for private traffic, or is it mostly like best for reaching younger consumers? Like, what do you think as far as demographics go?
I think it's actually still for younger generation, but my mom actually always gets into some weird groups. She doesn't really realize it, but I would think I think when you get to a certain age, you will have less time to be interacting in the groups. So I think WeChat groups actually more for the younger generation who have lots of time, especially when they're in school. They actually get lonely and they want to chat with someone. So they are usually very active in WeChat groups and also browsing through short form videos and live stream, etc.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the main exception to that, I think, would be, like you mentioned in your presentation, I think mommy baby products, maybe the consumer would be slightly older, but there's definitely an interest in private traffic. And then, maybe something that's more like education related or fitness related. Like, I think that private traffic can work for slightly older consumers. If it's like fitness related, because they're wanting to join the group to learn from, to have that community and like you said, fill that information gap. So I think those are two examples where maybe it could be slightly older consumers, but in general, like you said, I think a lot of the key examples are maybe what we would maybe like post 80s, like the Baling Ho, like I think that's probably like anybody post 80s, post 90s, like post 2000s, like those would be kind of the key groups for private traffic, I think, in my mind. Anything older than that, maybe it would be a little bit more difficult to operate.
And then I also see a question from the registration is that how do you actually drive traffic from public traffic to private traffic? It's such a confusing question. So how do you really drive the traffic to your private pool? I think like I just mentioned, the most commonly used way is actually using the packaging inserts into your packages or text to drive those people who already made purchase on your brand to your private traffic. That would be most easier way, because they already have a very good understanding of your brand. They already purchased your product. It's very low cost for you to drive them into your WeChat account. But for those incremental volume, for example, people who've never heard about you, when you want to try to pull them into your private traffic, it's just going to be very difficult. So I would usually suggest you prioritize the customers who already made purchase to your product and drive them through package inserts, text messages, or some WeChat push notifications.
Definitely. Well, I'd like to wrap things up. I think the one last question that I saw come through that I would like to kind of end things on is I saw several questions come through during registration that were kind of talking about, what is the future of private traffic? Do you think do you think this is a trend? Do you think it's going to kind of last a long time and become a common part of, brands' marketing strategies? Kind of do you think we'll see more and more brands adopting it? Like, do you have any future predictions for the private traffic trend?
I actually think it's going to go a long way, but because it's actually just a CRM plus loyalty program with the help of some fictional character or WeChat groups. But I think right now what's happening in China is that a lot of brands are already turning into WeChat work, because it's actually the official tool, authorized by WeChat, and it's more automatic versus in the past you have to do it manually. So I think in the past we are gonna have lots of tools or the CRMs that's embedding to WeChat work can help us automatically run our marketing strategy. It's very similar to what US is doing with the marketing automation to do automatic newsletter to your users, etc. So I think that's the future. But whether people are going to continue to use fictional IPs, I'm not sure about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that, like you said, a lot of the brands are, who are been more successful. It also takes a lot of manpower to run a lot of these groups. And so I think, we're going to be seeing more and more uses of technology, chatbots, things like that, to automate it a bit so that it's not as labor intensive because it's a very effective. I think the risk that we run then is that the more that you automate it, the less it is like private traffic, right? Part of the beauty of private traffic is that you feel like it's not automated. So, so I think that that's going to be like one of the biggest difficulties facing brands coming up, is trying to figure out how can we automate it, but also keep that personal touch. Like, what's the right mix of automation plus real humans? So I think that's going to be one of the big struggles. But I know that there's a lot more questions, but I think that we're going to kind of end things here for today. And if you have more questions, of course, feel free to reach out to Doris, reach out to me. We'd be happy to hear from you. Like we said, we both have plenty of ways to get in touch with us. So yeah, any last words from you, Doris?
Yeah, I'm very glad that we do this, and then maybe we can do some other topics. I see a lot of other questions that's not related to private traffic. For example, someone is asking, what's the difference between the e-commerce within WeChat and between in Kuaishou or Douyin? Maybe that's some other topics we can do in the future.
Yeah, definitely. If you guys are looking for some more English language, China marketing content, definitely contact us. And maybe, if we feel like there's a strong interest in a certain area, for example, today's webinar, I knew from how much people interact with my content on private traffic that this was a topic that all of you were interested in hearing more about. So if we feel like there's, we'll definitely be happy to run more of these in the future. So that's, definitely get in touch with us and let us know what you're interested in learning more about. So again, thank you all and have
Thank
a
you.
good rest of your day.
All right. Bye.